Urban Mobility India Conference as Expo 2023. It's very nice to see you here. On behalf of the UMI team, I congratulate you all for your presence. The session chair for this session is Professor B.K. Bhavatrathan. He is an associate professor, Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Palakkad. Professor Bhavatrathan has done his PhD from IIT Bombay and a postdoc at Future Urban Mobility Group in Singapore. Professor Bhavatrathan is experienced in the field of transportation systems with research interests, road network resilience, road safety, and travel demand. On behalf of UMI, I request Professor Bhavatrathan to come on the stage and hold the stage and proceed with the conference.
Yeah, thank you.
Please, sir.
So, very good morning to all of you. Thank you for being here. So, we'll formally start the session with the first paper titled Exploring Connectivity of Indian Road Network Pattern and its Classification Using Deep Learning. The authors are Almas Siddiqui, Veeramaniganda Prabhu, and Ashish Verma. I guess Almas Siddiqui is presenting. Please. Yeah.
Okay, 35.
Yeah. Authors will have 10 minutes for their presentation, followed by a 3-minute question answer. Please follow the timeline.
Hello, yeah, good morning. So I'm Almas Siddiqui from IIC Bangalore, PhD 4th year student. So my topic is on exploring connectivity of Indian road network patterns and its classification using deep learning technique. So these are the contents. I will be talking about how connectivity and connectivity of the road patterns are affected and how we can actually study them at the ground level. So if you see in the whole conference, we are all talking about integrated planning, resilient structures of the transportation systems. So I would say that everything starts by urbanization. So expansion of the city or compact cities, everything actually leads to unsustainable patterns if we do not plan them properly. And the spatial structure of the city is the urban form, which we tell as the combination of or the spatial imprint of the transportation and the land use. So the transportation, if we come to solely to transportation, there are different kinds of analyses. One is related to transport geography and second is related to modeling. Here I'm going to use technology of machine learning, deep learning techniques to understand how I can classify the Indian road networks of Indian cities. So first is related to spatial network analysis. And in this, I will try to understand how connectivity of the road networks can be quantified. Through deep learning technique, I will classify the road network pattern. And integrated land use transport is very broad term. So I will be focusing on mainly quantification of the transport networks. So if we start from the literature, I would say that in 2001, it started about the graph theoretical indices came into picture, and transport geography actually deals with the nodes and edges, analysis of the nodes and edges. So nodes are simply the points or the junctions of two roads meeting. So there are different degrees of analysis in this. And in 2012, they actually started developing parameters and which is related to the nodes and edges. So walking parameters were studied along with these nodes and edges. Then in 2013, they started understanding the patterns, how these patterns can be linked. And they mainly understood it through density, spacing, and the types of street network patterns. Then in 2016, an index was obtained, which is like based on the different connectivity scores. So a composite index was formed. So in 2020, Daniel actually said that network topology determines the shape of the city. So it is the main basis of the study I have done to identify the network patterns. And 2022 actually, a lot of studies happened in recent times, but this study actually understood the physical characteristics of the street network, considering the street network length in the spatial cell of 100 by 100 meters. So my study actually leads to the grid analysis, which is 1 by 1 kilometer grid. So along with this whole transport geography literature, I have seen that deep learning technique has been recently used by Shen in 2021, where they have tried to understand the street network pattern and how they can classify further. But in India, this has not been done yet. So in the aim of my study, I have tried to quantify, visualize, and compare the road network connectivity of 4 Indian cities and to check if unique index can represent the road network patterns. So first objective is to identify and classify the types of road network patterns in India using deep learning technique at micro level, which is 1 by 1 square kilometer grid. The second is to find the connectivity of Indian road networks by performing spatial network analysis. Then to examine the possibility of finding index ranges for Indian road network patterns through graph theoretical indices. So this is the methodological framework where I have used data from nodes and edges of OSM network. And after this extraction, I have formed grids of 1 by 1 square kilometer grid in QGIS. And then sample images were collected for classification. Then in spatial network analysis, we have understood the correlation between different connectivity indices and then selected few of them and calculated for each grid. For classification, annotation, labeling was done for each clip image, and training and validation was done. Then classification was done to show it in the classifier map. Then along with this, we have tried to understand whether the graph theoretical indices can determine the connectivity index range for each road network pattern or not. So these are the 4 cities, Delhi, Lucknow, Chandigarh and Bangalore, which we have done, collected from OSM network. And there are 6 types of road network patterns: gridiron, ring and radial, irregular blocks, tree and cul-de-sacs. No pattern, irregular means there is no particular defined pattern, and tree and irregular blocks. So in the data preparation, as you can see that this is a sample of clipped images which I have taken. For each class, we have taken approximately 120 samples. And for inputting into the model, we have given 764 images, and out of which 611 were for training and 153 were for testing based on 80-20 ratio. Then for clipping these images, when we started first by manual clipping, which was 5,500 grids, and then we switched to PyQGIS tool for 6561 images. Then ResNet model was used, which I have shown in Shen 2021 study as well, that this is the recent most model. Then it works better than 34 model, and it gave us accuracy of 96.73%, which is really good. So for the whole city, before going to the grid analysis, I have checked for whole city what kind of class distribution exists in Bangalore, Chandigarh, Delhi and Lucknow. So if you see in Bangalore, we have tree and cul-de-sacs and tree and irregular blocks as the main pattern, which represents it well at the ground truth as well. Chandigarh is well known as grid or block city, so it also represents the same thing here. And Delhi is mainly grid iron in some areas and tree and cul-de-sacs in some areas, so it's a combination. Even Lucknow is a combination of grid iron and irregular blocks and tree and irregular blocks. So these are the classifier maps which we have developed after using the deep learning techniques. So this is where the selected indices for the second study, which is spatial network analysis, where we had tried to understand whether these indices would lead to a composite range, and we can create an index to show it in each grid. So node density, intersection density, and all the other densities are just the number of nodes or edges in the grids. But for the network density is the length of the routes or edges considered within the grid. Then beta, gamma, and CNR are generally used in the transport geography sector. So to understand the ranges, we have done 3 levels of classification: first, second, and third level. It simply means that within a grid, if the major road is aligning with a particular pattern, then it's a first level. If major and minor road having a combination of different patterns, then second level. And if major, minor, and arterial roads are there, then third level. So in the second table, I have shown that if you see the ranges of alpha and beta, there are 2 types of indices. They have overlapping between the ranges. So it is actually difficult to get the range by that. Okay. So the grid coverage area ratio is the new index we try to find out, because if you see in the second image, there are grid which has, one is having 100% coverage of the network, second is 75% approximately, but both of them have equal number of nodes and edges. So the beta value is similar. So if you see, if I give a weightage of 1 to 100% coverage, it will be 1.33 beta. But if I see 0.75 in the 75% coverage, it will be different. So I cannot just directly go and use both of them as similar. So we have tried to understand whether this index ranges can also be represented properly or not. But in all the indices we have seen, everything starts with 0. So there is no range difference between them. So we could not get the range from the graph theoretical indices and even by GCAR. So this just graph theoretical indices, which have been mainly used in transport network analysis, are not suiting the Indian road network pattern. So this is what we concluded in the study, that ResNet 52 actually gave a good accuracy of 97%, and a unique index range cannot be found from the graph theoretical indices. But in future, we can use urban growth indices and also understand travel characteristics of the people and how they travel through mode choices, and incorporate in the studies further to see how we can create a better integrated framework. So thank you for listening. I would say that this is a very small step in understanding and integration of the land use and transport planning. So, but I would hope that this actually works in future, so that, because United Nations has given the degree of urbanization definition that we have to study grid by grid 1 square kilometer for the urban areas, the growth of the city. So we can actually start with this kind of study and go further for urban growth indices and other studies as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Almas. We have a 3-minute question answer session, so please be brief. If anyone has any question.
What is the practical significance of this research?
Okay.
And you touched upon in the last slide, right? You have future scope. So can you just expand that? What you meant by including travel characteristics?
Okay. So if I see practical implication, actually United Nations has given degree of urbanization definition, and they have, because we do not have a proper definition of urbanization until that time. So in 2017 they have given. So they have said that it is difficult to understand the growth of the city and the transport networks as a whole. So all these graph theoretical indices actually work on the city level. We do not study them at grid level. So I try to understand how we can actually incorporate that at grid level, because UN has said that you have to study 1 by 1 square kilometer grid in future to control the expansion of the cities. So this was an attempt to see how the connectivity can be understood. And this gave me an idea that, say, space syntax indices or other indices related to centrality measures or other indices can be further explored instead of just sticking to graph theoretical indices. So this is one aspect. And if you see the future scope, the land use integration with the transportation is mainly done in the planning aspect, the master plans and the CMPs and all. So what I am trying to do here is the quantification at the ground level, like at 1 by 1 square kilometer grid. If you see, I just want to see how the growth has happened, or the growth or the city has changed from time to time within that grid, and how the connectivity has changed also within that grid. So what I tried was to understand if I can get a composite index in one grid, but I did not get through graph theoretical indices. So further it can be studied and one composite grid can be found, and growth indices also can be understood together to see how the urban form can be quantified, because urban form does not have a proper definition as well. So just by using this degree of urbanization definition, we can also reach to quantification of urban form as well. So this is the implication. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. In your study, you have said that you have done some study in Bangalore.
Yes, sir.
And you should also be aware that we have a comprehensive mobility plan
Yes, sir.
for 2031. How do you correlate that plan and your study? How is it coming out? What is the final result? Anything which has come out?
So, sir, in CMPs, if you see, there are mainly travel activities, and the surveys are done to understand how people are traveling in the city. So, if I use indices to represent those activities as well within the grid, as I said it in the future scope, then I can actually see that how the connectivity also affects the grid, and how people live. Like, people try to live in an area where the connectivity is good. So if I understand how the growth is happening within a grid and how the connectivity is improving with time by providing new projects, which is usually given in CMPs, like new projects are given and we do not see what is the effect of the project. But we can actually see the effect of the project if a road is given or planned in that grid or an area, or if a flyover is given, the connectivity obviously would change. So, but there is no quantification of all these things. So at ground level, if we see, we can see the quantification, and we can see how this travel activities are also changing with time. So this all can be related and represented in CMPs as well. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Almas. Our next presenter is Gaurav Raheja and Divyang. They are presenting issues and challenges of persons with disabilities in the suburban rail mobility context of Mumbai. I welcome you on the stage. Please try to complete in 10 minutes.
Very good morning. Thank you, organizers, for this event. And I am along with my team, Mr. Divyang, Santosh, and Suyash. And this is kind of, I would say, still in progress, because we are right now advising the Mumbai Suburban Railways on more than 40 stations on issues of persons with disabilities and how they can be brought into the catchment of the suburban local system, which actually has a carrying capacity currently of around 8 million people per day, which is 1/3 of the total what the national rail carries per day. So it's very unique by itself. But at the same time, we believe, coming from IIT Roorkee and operating the Laboratory of Inclusive Design, that issues of persons with disabilities have mostly been ignored as a very separate subject, and consequently they get a very separatist approach which is exclusionary by nature, and therefore everybody thinks if you invest 100 crores on this, it is only a small fraction of population which will derive its benefits, and consequently the whole system lacks the sensitization and apathy that at any given time, all of us sitting in this room, even who may seem like able bodied, are actually temporarily able bodied. And people with aging disorders, people with diseases, ladies with stages of pregnancies, children are all part of that actual segment, because disability can also be seen as a limitation, which is about restricted mobility. So this quick presentation, I think in 5-7 minutes that we have, is just to touch upon this subject, but it's a very intense work which is still going on and almost for a year, with also studying the best practices of the world and trying to advise Mumbai Railways on how can we actually bring an impact onto the ground. So to give this perspective, to be honest, we do not even have a census data right now. And I was just with the Swiss Railways a couple of days back in Zurich, and they said that Switzerland itself has 20% of its population grouped in the category of persons with disabilities, while our census still says 2.1%, which is 2011 data. And since then, we do not have the updated statistics. The second thing is the Persons with Disabilities Act first time was passed in India in 1995, which is 23 plus 5, 28 years ago. And the next law that came was in 2016, in which the definition of disability itself got expanded from 7 typologies to 21 typologies, which means the numbers that we are actually looking at in the demographic fragment is much, much, much higher than the figures that we can cite from relevant sources right now, which seems very less. And I again cite a comparative benchmark, not to compare countries, but where the way the world is moving is the Swiss rail says the time is up. And by saying time is up, it means that from 1 January 2024, it is 100% expectation by law for autonomous, independent mobility of people with disabilities across the country, and the railways is committed to deliver that. If they don't, they have to face a legal lawsuit. So it means it's no longer a subject of charity, it's no longer a subject of dignity, it has become a subject of legality, which means it's an offense if you do not deliver this. Because most passengers with disabilities, if they are not able to travel, the fact is this mobility impacts their entire lives. They do not receive education, they do not receive employment, and consequently, we can actually say when access is denied, it's actually a life denied to those people. So it becomes important from a taxpayer's money when a system moves. It's inclusive and it provides all that support system to the whole thing. And therefore, it brings us to 2 very basic questions. What are we doing about it now? And why are we still talking about it? So the first clear focus is it appears pretty trivial. What are the issues that people face? And second, how can we actually address them? And what is that holistic approach that we are trying to briefly talk about? Looking at the whole system, I think we developed what is called as an IIS framework, which is information, infrastructure, and services. No system can deliver merely by infrastructure, merely by services. And I believe our system starts mobility by information, because the trip planning starts actually at home. And if you don't even know which system is accessible, what is my trip route, what is my segment to move around, what is my last mile connectivity option, and I don't have that information till date. And that too, that information is not available in accessible formats. If I'm a person with low vision, if I'm a person with color blindness, if I'm a person with vision impairment, if I'm blind, if I'm on a wheelchair, if I am a mother with an autistic child, I do not have these informations on what kind of a support system exists. So I think we are very critical about how this information system can be triggered around, not just by digital and real-time means, but also by some very basic systems wherein we have tried to put together a variety of situations, including emergency evacuation and support services on these rail systems, including low height counters, digital interfaces, even the heights of ATVMs, which is the automatic ticket vending machines, etc. So I'll pass it on to Divyang for the next couple of slides.
Taking the discussion forward, one of the most landmark international policy initiatives is the UNCRPD, which is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which also gives a very formal definition to what do we mean when we say a person with disability. And highlighting mobility, there are two articles, which is one is Article 9 and one is Article 20. Article 9 mandates that accessibility be an integral part of any public mobility system. And Article 20, which talks about personal mobility, highlights that personal mobility needs to be encouraged and engaged for persons with disabilities, and whatever needs to be done in the environmental intervention has to be carried out. And taking some of the pointers from the UNCRPD and also building upon the existing Persons with Disabilities Act of 1995, the Government of India mandated the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act in 2016, and out of which Section 40 and 41A mandate the implementation of various standards of accessibility in the sector of public transportation, and facilities have to be conformed to the existing accessibility standards across all forms of public mobility, which includes bus stations, railway stations, as well as airports. So this is a kind of the what exists as the policy landscape in terms of international and national. And what we have tried to do is, based on our preliminary studies, tried to map out that what are the typical types of mobility challenges faced by different types of disabilities. And we have just tried to summarize it in this one slide. So as you can see, that disability is also very diverse. So we have persons with locomotor impairments, visual impairments, then speech and hearing, then cognitive, neurodiverse, chronic illnesses, and also I think a large segment of the population which often gets neglected are people with multiple disabilities. So that is, which includes deaf blindness as well. So, and they can face different types of mobility challenges, which includes poor gait, balance, or coordination. And in terms of our study was conducted across 40 stations, out of which 19 were on the central line, 5 were on the harbour line, and 16 are on the western line. It's still an ongoing study. And our methodology began with a preliminary reconnaissance survey where we covered 5 key stations based on the footfall that they received, which included informal discussions with people, field observations, and photography. Using this preliminary study, we developed 2 frameworks. One that was mentioned by Sir, which is the Information, Infrastructure, and Services framework, trying to understand accessibility of the rail stations across these 3 dimensions, and also the stakeholders involved. So these 2 are our foundational frameworks for the study. And based on this, we were able to do the detailed field studies where we did field observations, photo documentation, and semi-structured interviews and 2 group discussions involving the various stakeholders, and also with representation of various disabilities in terms of the user groups. So these are the 2 frameworks that we
Yeah, I
developed.
think
I'll pass it
our
on to
time
Sir.
is up, so we'll just quickly let you know that each of these structure is a very detailed analytics behind it, and the stakeholder is not just the passenger, it's also the railway system who's delivering it behind the counters, the services on the ground. And we've tried to integrate all of them, and some of the impacts of this has right now been that the entire railway police force was also sensitized by a full workshop on being made blind, and also sensitized with various other disabilities. So each section actually requires, it's a long term project. I hope it continues and sustains, but what we found, this was on the ground, we mapped those issues, barriers, and challenges, and some of them were actually very trivial, but we found were inconsistent around it. So since our alarms beep here, so we'll just pause here. That it eventually, for us to solve this whole larger issue, I think we feel it's not just the railways alone which will work. It needs to talk to the various other agencies as a mobility system, and it's not the railway system. It has to talk like a mobility hub approach, because unless the bus system, the Bombay municipal system, and the rail system come together, the very first interaction doesn't happen, which is from the home till the rail system, and then onboarding, and then kind of taking the next steps, including the paratransit systems. So I think, to conclude, all we are trying to say is these specific barriers require specific approaches which cannot come from one sector. It does require multi-pronged approach, from information design to digital design to interface design to civil structure design. And finally, we believe it does require a very comprehensive and a holistic approach rather than piecemeal approach that only railways can deliver it. It's also the public culture. To cite this small example, the current rail coaches of Mumbai actually bear two signs, one on wheelchair, another uses a cancer sign, which is a zodiac sign. But I don't know how the city of Mumbai has accepted that sign, because it's a zodiac sign which is being used to represent a medical disease, and which further becomes very exclusionary. So we have given them a new set of designs, but now it's up to the railways for consideration to paint the coaches with a new system. But I think it's kind of beginning to start that kind of a change. And as I was sitting here, I was getting some updates from Mumbai. They've installed some tactile systems already on the new stations, and the work is already in progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gaurav. There's a 3-minute question answer session. If anyone has any question, he can ask. Please be brief. I think there's no question. Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the chair, I would now like to invite Manisha B to present the work titled Resilience of Transportation Infrastructure in India. Are we there yet?
A very good morning. I'm Manisha. I'm from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and I'm here to present a brief review on resilience of transportation infrastructure in India, and to check whether we are there yet, or what are the gaps and barriers that are preventing us from successfully integrating resilience in transportation infrastructure. So this is just an outline of my presentation. We will go through some research works and policies that are done around the world and India specifically, and what are the gaps and barriers and data and methodological constraints that I was able to identify from these researchers, and some future scope and what the conclusion is. So why do we need a resilient transportation infrastructure? So if you look at transportation system as a whole, you can see that it plays a very vital and pivotal role in disaster as a whole. It's very important for economical and social health, and at the same time it's a major contributor to climate change, and it is highly susceptible to the effects of climate change. Now, when you look further, you can see that in the aftermath of a disaster, transportation plays a very vital role, be it in evacuation and rescue operation or in the service delivery. So you need a resilient transportation system for resilient communities. And resilience could be defined in different ways. There are a number of definitions for resilience, and it was initially introduced in the field of ecology in the year 1973. And resilience, as defined by the United Nations disaster risk reduction, is the capacity to withstand, adapt to, and recover from hazards efficiently. So, resilience addresses the uncertainties and potential disruptions in transportation systems, and a transportation system without resilience can lead to profound economic implications. So if we go through the literature and you see how resilience is addressed in the transportation sector, you can see that ports has played a significant role in resilience research due to their critical role in global trade and international relations. And developed countries are more focused on developing robust infrastructure compared to developing countries who are highly susceptible, more vulnerable to the impact of these natural disasters. So, resilience is interpreted in different ways in terms of its restorative capacity or capacity of its systems to rebound from unforeseen disasters, or its ability to adapt to disturbances, its adaptive capacity, or it can be further boiled down to the system's ability to continue functioning in the face of adversity, or how much time it takes to get back to its original performance level. So, throughout the literature, this particular graph has played a very significant role. You can see that this graph represents a resilient, less resilient, and a non-resilient system. System 1 is a resilient system which, even in the aftermath of a disaster, goes back to its original performance level, while system 2 is a less resilient system, but it has achieved some new steady performance level, but system 3 has failed entirely after the disruptive event. So, resilience, there are different dimensions. It is explained in terms of its vulnerability, adaptability of the system, and throughout, however, it is in different sections, it is considered in different ways, or it preferences a difference. But the R4 resilience framework, which includes the rapidity, which is the speed of recovery, resourcefulness, the presence of resources, and redundancy, presence of alternate solutions or alternate elements, and the robustness, which is the ability to provide functionality, this kind of explains the different dimensions of resilience. So, throughout the literature, if you look at the world as a whole, throughout the literature, network topology is considered as one of the major contributors to network resilience. And there have been different optimization approaches or hierarchical Bayesian models, and as well as analytical hierarchical process to determine or identify or measure resilience of networks. Then there have been frameworks which are developed to identify which all adaptation planning methods are suitable that can contribute to better resilience of the transportation system. And in practice, you can see that the Florida Department of Transportation has developed a resilience action plan. Similar to in Oregon, there is a resilience plan that they have developed to address the resilience of critical infrastructure, which also includes the transportation network. And there is an Australian resilience policy who has created a critical infrastructure resilience policy, which recognizes the significance of essential infrastructure. Now, when you look at India, okay, we are not there yet, but we are slowly and steadily gaining some kind of momentum in resilience research. You can see that there have been applications of game theory, and there have been applications to identify critical links within the road network, and composite adaptability index was developed to identify how these different adaptation bundles can contribute to resilience. And if you look at the resilience in practice, you can see that with the help of World Bank, there is the Himachal Pradesh State Transformation Project, which aims to build mountain roadways that are climate risk resistant. And we have the Green National Highways Corridor Project, again with an idea of mainstreaming climate resilience in project design and implementation. So there have been research, there have been practice, then what is the issue? So we have the constraints and methodological challenges here. You can see that throughout the literature, as the time progresses, there have been evolving interpretations to resilience. So this continuously evolving interpretations have created methodological challenges. And you can see that there is no proper data quality. The quality of data that you have of the previous disasters are not good enough, or there is no proper data sharing between the stakeholders. And there are constraints to the amount of data that is available. And if you're going to collect new data, obviously it is costly and time consuming. Then obviously transportation networks are complex models. It will take time. And location, whatever more, there are many models that are developed which are location specific and which have limited their application in other areas. There are modeling issues. Obviously, when you're using some other kind of model in developing a resilience model, there are computing errors that can happen, and sometimes these models are outdated models. and there is a complexity of integration. How will you integrate the different dimensions that comprise resilience? Then, what are the gaps and barriers? There are practical gaps as well as research gaps. You don't have a, there have been many approaches in research, but there is no a single idea or a single, nobody has made a single framework to measure resilience. How will you measure resilience? It's still a question. And there are limited disaster scenarios. Majority of the research works have, they have either applied their methodology on a simulated disaster or a disaster that has already happened, and the unpredictability of disaster is not considered in majority of the research. And we don't have a standard procedure, you don't have a standard framework that you can give to an organization and ask them to implement on the basis of that. There is one major disadvantage or one major lack that we have seen is that majority of the policies are developed with experts opinion. So obviously experts opinion is important, but one thing that we are all forgetting is that there is a large set of vulnerable population who have weathered all these storms due to their, just because of their stubbornness, and it is in their DNA, and the information that they can provide in policy making is very important. And there is challenges in operationalization. There is no education, nobody is educating you how to incorporate resilience. There is a lack of knowledge and lack of funding. There is no internal and external coordination between organizations. So you need a resilient infrastructure. It's a system which interacts with its environment, and you need coordination between the different organizations that forms the system. And there is a lack of long-term focus. If you look at transportation planning, you can see that when you talk about the short-term transportation planning, it often fails to prioritize resilience, which necessitates awareness raising and education. So if you look at the future scope, and what I basically want to say is that the researchers can look at developing a standardized performance metrics, which is tedious. I would not say that it's very easy to develop a single metrics for measuring resilience or integrating resilience, but it is a possible idea that you can do in future. And how will you so one major thing is that transportation system is one of the lifelines, and it is very interdependent, and there are so many complexities involved with other critical infrastructure or other lifelines. So you can also study the complex, we can also contribute more to the complexities and interdependencies and the multi-hazard resilience that can result into cascading disasters, and how well can you integrate local expertise and community involvement in enhancing resilience. All these could be thought for the future researchers. Now, what we need are systems that are flexible, responsive, and robust. And to achieve those resilient systems, we need a collaboration between policy, practice, and research. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
We have a 3-minute question answer session. Please, if anyone has a question, you can ask. Please be brief.
I have a comment, rather, not a question. So you're saying standard indices to measure resilience is what is important. And there have been, at least at the research level, many attempts to do that. So what is also important maybe at the policy level to incorporate these indices into the benefit cost analysis, so that certain aspects, certain proportions of budgets can be earmarked for improving resilience, and that can be quantified.
Definitely.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Next, we have a GIS-based approach to solve sustainable port hinterland connectivity by proposing optimal locations to drive ports using a location model. Nilkanti Gaurav and Dr. Chetan R. Patel. Nilkanti, please. 10 minutes.
Good morning, all respected delegates. I am Nilkanti Gaurav from SVNIT Surat. With the support of my co-author, Dr. Chetan Patel, I am going to present my paper, a GIS-based approach to solve sustainable port hinterland connectivity by proposing optimal locations of dry port using a location allocation model. So the contents we are going to see: first the introduction, then we'll know about the study area, then we'll see the methodology used in this study, then we'll measure the efficiency of that methodology, and we'll conclude. So first, introduction. As we know, India is the fastest growing economy and fifth largest economy in the world. We handle around 4.6 billion goods each year, and it generates the travel demand of 3 trillion ton kilometer of transportation. So in future, it is going to rise, and for that we will be needing more logistic infrastructure. As per the current scenario, out of total freight traffic, 71% is shared by road and only 17.5% is shared by rail. So the disadvantage we can see by the road traffic are congestion, CO2 emission, and time consuming travel for the long distance haul. So each year, if you see, due to freight traffic, CO2 emission is 220 million tons, and only 95% is shared by road freight traffic only. And if you see the cost breakup of total logistic in India, 62% is shared by transportation only. So we need to optimize this somewhere. Now, next, in maritime transport, ports are the main gateways for international trading. And due to increasing demand, there are two problems are arising. First is port can expand up to certain limit only due to their physical limitation. And second, they are attracting more of the freight traffic by road. So there is congestion happening in port cities. Second, the heat island effect is creating around the cities. So for that, we are providing a solution of locating dry port away from the city limits. They are inland logistic hubs which will relieve connected seaports pressure of overcapacity and space limitation. Also, it will improve inland access of the port and help to develop local regions' trade economy. They will reduce the contaminated emissions and accidents from road transportation. As you can see in this image, if you see the image A, you can see the port location and the city around it. All the lines which are coming to the port are freight traffic by road. In image B, we are placing dry port away from the port location, and then that dry port is attracting all the road traffic. We are connecting that dry port by dry port to the port by rail connectivity. So it will reduce the congestion, CO2 emission in the port city, and also the time of travel will reduce. So the main objective of this paper is we are going to identify the locations of these dry ports around the candidate port location in our selected study area. And for that, we have used a GIS based approach in which we are going to perform a land suitability analysis in ArcGIS, where we are going to reduce our huge chunk of study area into small suitable land parcels based on various parameters, and those parameters we are going to weight them using analytical hierarchy process. So whatever suitable land parcels we are getting, we are going to verify it on satellite imagery, and whatever obtained candidate locations for the dry port are, we are going to sort them using location allocation model. So study area profile, candidate port we have chose is Jawaharlal Nehru Port. It is the second largest port in India, and its capacity is 118 million tons per annum. The total traffic coming to this port, 82% is traveled by road, and due to that, heat island effect is being created around the Mumbai region. So available capacity of this port is not issue, but it has very low rail coefficient and its demand is declining over the years. To implement our methodology, we have selected the study area Nagpur region. It lies in the shades of JNPT, has a total area of 51,599 square kilometer, and it is located in the central part of India, so it has high potential to attract the freight traffic from all the corners of our country. So first part of our methodology is land suitability analysis. We are going to break down this land into small suitable land parcels. For that, we selected 10 parameters away from the high population density, proximity to non-working and marginal working population, then proximity to production center in the area, access to road, then access to rail, slope of the terrain, land use, land cover, and away from the existing dry port and ICD's location, because already there is one dry port and 2 inland container depots are present in the Nagpur region. So for these parameters, we prepared thematic maps in the raster form. Then we reclassified these maps using reclassified tool in ArcGIS as per the suitable criteria that we want to have for dry port location. And then we provided weights to them based on AHP method and combined all these parameters with the help of weighted sum tool and got the final results. Now for these we considered 2 cases. First, we did not consider the existing facilities because we wanted to check where all the locations are falling on this region. Second, we considered the existing facilities. We provided some buffer from the existing facilities like 100 kilometer, and then we checked where other locations are falling. So in the first case, we got the highly suitable land of 0.46% and very less suitable land is around 80%. In case 2, you can see the red color buffer around the existing facilities, and that is our less suitable land. It is a buffer of 100 kilometer, and dark blue patch is, you can see, is the highly suitable land for dry ports. So we verified this land on satellite imagery, and then we came to location allocation model, where we first created a network data set of this Nagpur region and performed service area analysis to check the reach of existing dry port location. And we identified beyond 100 kilometer, there are still some production centers were there, they were left unserved. So we have to design dry ports and inland logistic hubs for them. Then whatever the locations, land suitable land we got, that we verified on satellite imagery. Total 14 candidate locations we identified and performed location allocation model for them, for which we chose problem type is minimize impedance to reduce cost and time of travel. Then impedance cutoff is set to 100 kilometer, and by trial and error method, we first provided 3 facility input, then 4, and then 5, and we identified 4 are the suitable one because they are covering all the other production center in the region, that you can see in the service area analysis. Within 150 and 100 kilometer, we are covering all the production centers. So these are the on-ground locations of the dry port in the Nagpur region. First is in Nagpur district, second in Gondia district, third we got in Chandrapur district, and fourth in Gadchiroli district. So now we have to measure the efficiency of these locations. So for that, we have selected dry port number 2 in Gondia district. So to measure the efficiency, we use fresh greenhouse gas calculator developed by Terry. So we consider 2 conditions: the region without dry port and the region with dry port. So with dry port, the GHG emission is reduced by 75% and the cost is reduced by 48%. So we conclude the modal share in this case is an efficient solution to choose over direct delivery by truck. So the conclusion is the huge hinterland of this country needs an efficient freight transport network plan to reduce the impact on environment and support country for economic growth. The methodology followed in this study, you can use it for any scale of work. Also, you can change the parameters and use any number of parameters. Then as we see, if one dry port location can reduce the GHG emission by 75% and travel cost by 48%, then if we manage to make efficient multimodal network of dry port around the country, it will create a healthy environment surrounding the logistic activities. In case of policies, we need to develop a consolidating complex logistic data. We have to take it on a single platform, and we should emphasize on engaging the relevant stakeholders. Also, to mitigate the creation of heat island effect around the urban areas, we have to locate these dry ports away from the city limits, and each port should prioritize the enhancement of its rail infrastructure for sustainable freight movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilkanti. So, floor is open for questions.
Interesting theme. I've been working on this area. Couple of things methodologically. I didn't find how many dry ports are required. Number one, because it's very important to know did the existing dry port was reaching a capacity saturation. That should have been there. I didn't find it. Then how many dry ports? And then the last question is where to locate. Where to locate, obviously, you've done nicely through AHP. Obviously, there are variants of AHP. There's a simple AHP you could have. Maybe that is the further work you could have done. But I think one of the very important points still is what are the benchmarks or say how to find that you need another dry port in an area. I think that still is quite a gray area in our country. Still, the benchmarking, how much of dry port is there? Are there any capacity augmentation program for the current dry port which you have studied? I think all these are points which probably could have. You would like to elaborate it later if you have not done it, maybe.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sure, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Yeah, thanks for the nice presentation. They are more advanced, optimization-based location allocation model, which I thought would be a better way and more effective and accurate way to find the optimal location. Did you consider that as an option, or why you chose for a more simple way of doing it?
Yes, sir. I actually chose a simple way for doing it, but I'm still learning in this field. So I will definitely try to know more about this advanced location models.
Yeah. Thank you, Nilkanti.
Thank you, sir.
Next paper that we have is on evaluating accessibility of a multimodal transportation hub, a case study of Vaitila Mobility Hub in Kochi, India. Dimple Maria is presenting. You'll have 10 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dimple Maria. I'm an architect and planner. I'm working as a research associate in Barrier Free Consultancy Cell in College of Engineering, Trivandrum. We are working for built environment accessibility. As Raheja sir has already mentioned about accessibility, I'm here also with a similar topic. So our topic is evaluating accessibility of a multimodal transportation hub, a case study of Vaitila Mobility Hub, Kochi, India. So this will be the presentation outline. So as we know, transportation is essential for connecting people, goods, and ideas over long distances in today's world. Among the people, there are a set of people who can be considered as the vulnerable groups, which includes persons with disability, pregnant mothers, elderly persons, etc. So transportation has a crucial role in ensuring that everyone, irrespective of their socioeconomic situation or physical abilities, may fully participate in society. The accessibility and inclusivity of public transportation system are of utmost importance because they directly impact the degree to which people from diverse background and with varying abilities can effectively navigate the urban environment. Here, accessibility can be defined as ease to access or ease to use of infrastructure. And 1/6 of the world population and 1/50 of India's population are persons with disability. Inclusion of these population can ensure full participation in society, economic growth, social equity, etc. The government has enacted various rules and policies for inclusion since 1995 with the PWD Act. Later, in 2006, UNCRPD was ratified by India. Then an important milestone is the Accessible India campaign, which was initiated in 2015 with one of its three pillars as transportation system accessibility. The RPWD Rule 2017 mandates following harmonized guidelines 2016 for built environment accessibility, later which was amended in 2023. So, along with making public spaces and transportation system accessible, it also supports achieving SDGs. So, on our regular interaction with PWDs, we came to know that many persons with disability are reluctant to access many facilities due to lack of accessible public transportation system and associated infrastructure. So, with these rules and SDG goals in mind, this is our expectation. But this is the reality in most of the cases. What can be done to bridge the gap between the expectation and the reality? Just making building accessible is not enough for a person with disability or an elderly to freely access a space, for which we need the public transportation services and the pathways leading to this service to be accessible. A solution for this is ensuring seamless transportation through the provision of accessibility in public transport. An integrated transportation system, such as a multimodal transportation system, is a good starting point to ensure seamless transportation. Multimodal hubs, which integrates various modes of public transportation, public transportation is a need of the hour as they are affordable and efficient. So that it is vital for these to be accessible. So, for the purpose of a study, we have identified Vaitala Mobility Hub in the city of Kochi, located in Ernakulam district in Kerala, which serves as the state's commercial and industrial epicenter. The district has 1 in 50 of its population as person with disability, similar to that of the average in the state. The Vaitala Mobility Hub, located at the central part of the city, acts as an important transfer hub for numerous forms of transportation, including buses, ferries, and metros. It improves connection, making commuting easier and decrease traffic congestion in the city, all while making a significant contribution to the state's total transportation infrastructure. The study aims to assess the environmental accessibility of Vaitala Mobility Hub in the city of Kochi, Kerala, with the objectives of identifying the methods of assessing the accessibility, conducting access audits, and suggesting recommendations for improving accessibility. For that, we had conducted literature reviews on multimodal transportation system and accessibility guidelines, which are Harmonized Guidelines 2016 for built environment and IRC SP 17/2018 for assessing the accessibility in connection between the terminals. Then me and my team conducted primary study, which includes access audits of 3 terminals, that is metro station, boat jetty and bus terminal and their connections. Following this, semi-structured interviews were conducted with respondents selected through purposive and convenience sampling. This enabled us to cross-validate the findings between the 2 methods. And as a final part, the paper will discuss some recommendations. So this is a schematic layout of Vaitala Mobility Hub, located close to the NH 66, connecting north and south of the state. Here there are 3 modes of transportation: bus terminal, Kochi Metro Rail, and Kochi Water Metro service. So this shows the pedestrian connectivity between various terminals, and this image shows the shortest connection between the bus terminal and the water metro, and this image shows the view of the route connecting metro rail station and bus terminal. So in order to understand the best practices around the world, we analyze literature case studies. This is an example of the case of Portland, where in multimodal system, the methods they have adopted in each modes are identified, and it was understood that interventions were carried out under the following categories: accessibility of vehicle, associated built infrastructure, and organization system. And in order to assess the accessibility of the hub, we used Harmonized Guidelines 2016, and for the connections, we use IRC SP 117/2018, and we have used the mentioned parameters for the assessment. And in order to make it easy to comprehend, we have quantified the accessibility of various terminals and its connection. As a first step, the accessibility of individual parameters that you saw earlier is evaluated using this equation, and then the average of the accessibility of each parameters give the total accessibility of the terminal or a connection. And as you can see in the case of terminals, the best terminal is largely inaccessible, with most of the parameters having less than 50% of the scoring. And the metro rail station is mostly accessible, and which only lacks the parking, as there is no proper demarcated parking, accessible parking facility available. The actual main issues lies in the connection between these terminals. As you can see, most of all the parameters scores least when it comes to the connections between the terminals. And in order to understand the other factors affecting accessibility outside the purview of the checklist, interviews were conducted with users including person with disability, elderly, person without disability, staffs, etc. And the main issues addressed were between the connections itself. It's like including lack of crossing and pedestrian facilities, lack of lighting, signages, etc. In the terminal accessibility, it is in case of bus terminus, the users address the issues with the difficulty of boarding and deboarding, lack of amenities in the waiting area, etc. And in both other notes, most of the people were satisfied with the facilities available. So based on our findings, in order to improve the accessibility of the hub, we would like to suggest some minimal and simple interventions like providing accessible pedestrian pathways connecting from the NH to the hub as indicated in the yellow line, connecting the 3 terminals. And then at the places where pedestrian needs to cross the roads, we recommend providing tabletop crossings indicated in red. And in order to reduce conflicts, we recommend the provision of skywalks linking the bus terminus and its parking, and water metro and metro rail terminals. And then accessible parking should be provided beside all the terminals. Also, some other recommendations including in the vehicular facilities, ramps shall be provided in buses for easy boarding and deboarding of wheelchairs. Then buggies can be provided to move from one end to the other end of the bus terminus. And in the case of built infrastructure, accessible toilets, ramps, handrails, tails, etc., to be provided as per the guidelines. And the staff members should be sensitized enough. So to conclude, Vaitala Mobility Hub plays a significant role in the development of Kochi and its hinterland. So improving the accessibility of the hub will ensure that it will broaden its user base, thus bringing the goal of SDG and AIC closer. And nationwide, it is essential to ensure the environmental accessibility for the vulnerable group. So in conclusion, I would like to finish my presentation with a quote by Judith Human that you can read it, but hoping that less people would relate to this quote in the future. Thank you.
We have a 3-minute question answer session. If anyone has any question, he can ask.
Does the multimodal hub also provides for the single ticketing, which makes it easier for the commuter to take different modes with the same ticket?
Actually, now in Kochi, it is like 3 different authorities. The metro service itself is both they have boat jetty and the metro rail facility. Even though it is under the same authority, they have separate ticketing system. And for the bus service, it's entirely a different thing. If we bring up like a combined system, it will be the best option.
So do you think that having one institution for managing multimodal hubs would be better for the convenience and affordability?
Yeah, of course, that will be the better option. Like making like a single ticketing system will be helpful for like we don't have to switch between the modes or like different flows to get the ticket from different.
Thank you.
I'm one of the authors of this particular paper. To answer a question, currently right now, like Water Metro and the Kochi Metro are actually under the one gambit, under the Kochi Metro initiative. And initially, they did try for a short time. They actually tried using the same card that was available for the metro systems on the buses as well. Now they've actually formulated something called KUNTA, Cochin Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, which just comes under Kerala governments. They actually started something called the Kerala Municipal Transportation Authority Act. So they started that right now, and it's still not coming to fruition, complete fruition right now. So it's still in the process.
I am Siradul Haq from DMRC. So, in your study, have you found out what should be the ideal travel time for changing from one mode to another mode?
Now it's like we have to switch between the modes using like as pedestrian. I would say that now it's like they have to climb down from a person coming in a metro rail. They have to climb down the three floors in the Whitela station to get down, and then they have to move. It is like around a 5 minute stay, like or 4 to 5 minute stay time for a person to move from one mode to other. So if we connect it with like with a single ticketing system or like with a skywalk or something, it can be reduced. The travel time can be reduced, and that will be more convenient. Here, there are roads in between with a very, I would say, terrific traffic in that area. So that has to be like once we provide skywalks and all, the time can be reduced, of course.
What should be the desirable time from changing from metro to water metro or metro to bus?
I'm not sure about that, sir. I see that.
And did you incorporate the requirement of this feeder services also? Did you consider in your system?
Here we have like auto services as the feeder service, but this feeder service, like no one will be preferring like feeder service in that shortest distance. It's like
now going out of the system, basically from coming
so,
out of the metro or coming
can I
out
ask
of
my friend, my co-author to answer?
Just to answer the question, sir. To answer the first question, our objective was to focus on the qualitative aspects and not the time limit, because the issue that we felt was that there's a lot of conflicts there, vehicular and passenger conflicts were abundant there. So our objective was to improve it qualitatively, and towards that end, we actually recommended giving a skywalk. And the second aspect, feeder services, yes, we've considered that. We've given one of the proposals. But the issue with buses currently in India are that even if we make the terminal accessible, the buses also will have to be equally accessible. So that is one challenge that we've seen in our when we did this case study there. So while metro and water metro is extremely accessible, the vehicles are all accessible. Bus has a component, is a weakest link there. So basically, our objective is to suggest making the buses accessible as well. And towards that, we also suggested giving feeder services, which will connect the various services, and the distance between the various terminals around 200 meters maximum. So like you're talking about like 4 to 5 minutes of walk.
Thank you.
I would like to interrupt here. We have a tight schedule, so I would like to invite the next presenter. The audience can interact in the tea break for other questions. So our last presenter for the day is Aditya, and he'll be talking about using urban topology to identify critical links of road network as centrality-based approach. You have 10 minutes.
Hello. Yeah, good morning, everyone. This specific topic of using urban topology to identify critical links has been like touched by many people in the past presentations or in the past studies as such. But this would present a new view towards how to use centrality, or how centrality can be used to understand the formation of a city network as such. So these would be some of the contents I would be discussing today, where we would be trying to understand planned versus unplanned networks, and the network analysis measures which had been used in the past, centrality as such, the analysis which we adopted in this research, and the results and discussion as such. So when we are talking about planned versus unplanned networks, in this city, you can actually demarcate what a planned network and what an unplanned network is. To show it pictorially, so this is a planned network, and this side, the right side, is an unplanned network, where the red dots show the formation of the junctions or the road network around that junction specifically. So if you can see, there can be a clear demarcation on the basis of the formation of the city itself, and this might impact the traffic flow in the city. So there had been network analysis measures which had been used in the past, which might be some density-based networks, which might include the network density or the clustering coefficient, etc. Some length-based analysis measures, which might be average link length or the distribution, like the link distribution itself. Accessibility-based measures, which might be isochrone maps, and centrality measures as well. So, as we have an idea of centrality measures, just to revisit, centrality measures the importance of a specified link or a node in a network. So, it can be either edge-based or a node-based centrality measure, where the top figure shows a node-based centrality measure and the bottom one shows an edge-based centrality measure. And specifically, between a centrality has been identified in the literature in the past to be very important, so as to reflect the actual importance of a link in a network. So between a centrality quantifies the number of times a link or a node. Specifically here we are talking about a link-based centrality. So how many times a link has been in the shortest paths of across the network. So here is the mathematical formula of that, where the sigma st of v defines how many times that specified link has been in the shortest path of the network, and sigma st defines the number of shortest paths. So, as between a centrality indicates the specific importance of that network, of that link in the network, we can try to understand what are all the specific important links in the network. But an important link in a network should mean that traffic should be flowing through that. And this specifically, we can attribute this to the importance of that link, because we can see that main roads carry most of the traffic in the network. So, more important the link is, higher the traffic flow in the network, and wider should be the road to accommodate that amount of traffic. In the absence of travel data or the traffic data in that network, the current study tries to understand whether there is a correlation between a centrality and the width of individual links in the network. So for the sense of analysis, we have considered the OpenStreetMap OSM data, where we have taken the vector data out of the OSM data, which is openly available, and we have cleaned that data for all the small stubs and irregularities in the network. So this data, we have considered Ludhiana city as it is a demand-oriented network, where the city has formed because of a demand, but not due to a respect to planning measure. So after considering this data, like after taking this data, we have taken the data of trunk roads, primary, secondary, tertiary, and residential roads, and have merged into them. So this was done to remove that demarcation of width. That is, all the roads are built the same. So initially, at least. Later on, because of the demand, the roads were widened, and because of which more number of higher the traffic flow in the network. So this data was cleaned using two different tools, which was DepthMapX a tool in the ArcGIS, and the DepthMapX software itself. So I hope the image is clear, but the network was cleaned, and it was analyzed for the centrality in the DepthMapX software, and the values after the analysis were used for correlation analysis. So we try to understand whether there is a correlation which exists between the width of the road segments and the centrality of the segment itself. This can be an important measure because it gives a disaggregate measure of individual link, where we can understand the importance of individual link and the correlation between that link and the width of the road. So a basic correlation, Pearson correlation analysis was carried on, where this is the mathematical formulation of the same. And we tried to understand whether there exists a correlation between them, and we found out that a correlation exists, and that's actually a really good aspect, because without using the traffic data, without using a real world traffic data, we can understand whether these links were important in the formation of the network itself, and which can be used to take decisive measures or policy measures instance. So for instance, we here try to understand, we here found out that the correlation was 0.468. And this can actually be understood in an ideal scenario. In an ideal case scenario, an important link should have a higher between a centrality and a higher width. So a lower important link should have a lower between a centrality and a lower width. But because of this aberrated correlation between a centrality and the width, we understood that high between a centrality and low width of roads, for instance, are very important links, but which were not considered for road widening or other aspects of policy measures. So this was used to understand that the link was important topologically, but wasn't considered for any policy measures. Similarly, lower between a centrality and higher width of roads, that is, the links have a lower between a centrality, that they were less important in the topological aspect, but they were considered for that higher width because higher traffic was flowing. So respective policy measures with respect to between centrality can be formulated using choice between a centrality or angular between a centrality as depicted in this study. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. So, any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, nice work. The centrality, the question I have is, you'll get a network level centrality indicator, but you would not get which part of the network to improve the overall thing, right? You get a correlation that if you do this, maybe it will improve. But is there a way you found where, from centrality analysis, you understand where the problems in the network are?
Yes, sir. Where the specified problem, in a sense, we can consider the network like a broken network where individually we consider the parts of the network, and there we can identify these. But on an aggregate level in the network, we can specifically identify if that link were important with respect to the width. So, for instance, if that specified link had a higher width but lower centrality, or higher centrality but lower width. So, accordingly, we can actually understand. And this actually presents a small speck of the analysis which we are going forward towards. Like we try to use this analysis to understand accident behavior in a network level data. So yes, sir.
So you get node wise centrality.
This is
not
an edge
network
based
level.
centrality.
Edge wise.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess we have time to entertain more questions either to the speaker or if the other speakers are around. We can also have questions for them. To this speaker, are there any questions?
Road section, in the sense, this was the total urban area of Ludhiana city, where we have considered a buffer of 5 kilometers. The width of the roads, as previously, just a second. Maybe I can show my presentation. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So as I have shown in the presentation, yeah, exactly. So trunk, primary, secondary, and etc. So the road width data was actually acquired from the OSM data itself. So this is the road width data as depicted by the OSM data initially. So for each trunk, primary, secondary, etc., we have considered the width and we have considered the centrality. Exactly, that's the thing. Yes. The thing is, we have actually calibrated that using the Google data as well. But specifically, at least the openly available data set, whichever is available to us, whether it is ideal or not, that itself is an erroneous aberration in the data analysis as such. So that's what. Here I have presented a basic correlation analysis, but further on, we would be using error-based models like statistical models to absorb that error as well.
I think the larger point is it's be advisable to do some on-field verifications of width.
Yes, sir. Like in a sense, on-field verification would also be good, but this would be in a sense that if you really don't have any available data set with you, like any.
I think the larger point is right now you have done this analysis based on OSM. Yes. The data itself is not reliable. The data itself is not reliable when we are seeking it from the OSM. So maybe a few data points as a future scope of work it's advisable to do that also. Is the
sure. I would be considering that as well. Thank you.
Nice presentation. I have one question. In your presentation, you have mentioned alternate route. So can you elaborate on that one?
Yes, sir. So there have been actually a few studies which have extended on this notion of centrality, where they have considered these links to be important or non-important as such. So if we actually understand those at an aggregate level on a path level analysis, we can try to understand whether these links could be used for alternative routing decisions or might be even one-way, two-way decisions, because the type of analysis which I have done is a cyclic analysis. So it considers a cyclic loop. It's not a cyclic, so it's not a directional. So maybe that can be a future aspect of this study. And additionally, there were decisions based on which the routes themselves were closed. If you have an idea of a Bayes paradox itself, so that specific link was so central that when it got closed, the network measure, better to say, the network performance actually increased. So there are some aspects of this which can be extended as well.
Thank you. So, based on the OSM data itself,
Yes.
This Ludhiana is where you
Yes.
tried it. Ludhiana, you are seeing a trend that follows. I mean, with critical links, critical in the sense centrality based.
Yeah.
More central links are more wider right now in Ludhiana.
At least that correlation was found out to be 0.468.
Okay.
That respect to correlation.
Linear.
That and I might actually extend this to understand what would be the case in case of Chandigarh, which is a planned city, and a comparative study would be helpful.
Compare with a planned versus unplanned city. Any further questions? This centrality, when you are looking at the shortest distance, it's not dynamic, right? It's geographic shortest distance
Yes,
itself,
yes,
right?
yes.
In fact, there are other variants of centrality that's coming up wherein we look at the dynamic as the day progresses, time of day progresses, the centrality also varies because the shortest route is also dependent on traffic.
Understood.
It's a very interesting idea. We have also been looking at centrality based.
Glad to hear.
Okay, and crashes also. In fact, we could see, looking at the entire road network of Kerala, that centrality is in fact a predictor of crashes as well.
Exactly. We were trying to do the same thing in Ludhiana.
Right.
Yes.
So all the best.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments to this speaker? Or in fact, we have a few more minutes. So to any other speakers, if there are any general comments, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
If not, we'll close this session. Any announcements to be made? Yeah. Thank you all for being here. We formally close this session.
Thank you so much. Sir, we have a token of appreciation for you.